This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is
World.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Hello, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the spiciest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they transpired today? I'm your co-host, Sadaf Hassan.
And I'm Sarah Sahagian. And this week, we're tackling the queen of all Nepo babies. She's a fashion it girl, an Oscar winner, a wellness guru, a rock star's wife, and the most popular girl at Hollywood High. Well, I should say she's not a rock star's wife anymore, but we'll get to that. Who is she? Obviously, you know we're talking about Gwyneth Paltrow. So, Sadaf, are you a fan of GP? What does she mean to you?
I used to be such a fan of Miss Goop. I love her in movies. My deep cut for Gwyneth is Proof, also starring Anthony Hopkins and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah.
Such a great movie, so underrated. I love watching her on screen. However, she strikes me as a little bit of a bitch, and that's made me like her a little bit less in other ways. However, I must say she is the essential celebrity. I love hearing what she's up to. The goop of it all is endlessly fascinating to me. Whether you like the choices she makes or not, she is so amusing. And I feel like she might actually be the last of our true movie stars in that sense. How do you feel, Sarah?
I went to an all-girls private school. She definitely gives us a bad name, whereas I would say Reese Witherspoon gives us a good name because Reese Witherspoon is sort of the other side. They both went to private schools. I think the essential difference there is Reese Witherspoon did her homework and seems to have a work ethic and care. And Gwyneth Paltrow, I guess, just was born tall and beautiful and just sort of felt like she deserved everything in the world and got it, right?
Yeah, she has very strong entitled energy.
If she heard this episode, which she won't, but if she heard it, she would just say the things to me that she used to say to her fellow students at Spence, which is like, I'm jealous of her or whatever, right? Like that's always Gwyneth's defense, that I'm jealous. And to an extent, maybe I am jealous, but that doesn't mean that I can't also say that I don't really respect what she's built because I don't think she put any effort into doing it. But she's fascinating.
She is, and I'm with you. She's definitely like the popular girl at school. It's hard to love that all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, if you had a visualization of privilege in the dictionary, it would be Gwyneth. I mean, she wears the row to court when she's being sued. She tells people to buy $15,000 vibrators. It's not a good look, right? It's this privilege with a complete lack of awareness about being privileged, right? And that is, I think, what a lot of people find annoying. And I would say most young women, I mean, this type of education that she had, that I also had, and I will own that, I have that kind of privilege, seem to have a little bit more awareness about the privilege and aren't going around creating a website telling the average person to buy a $15,000 vibrator. Like, that's just what I'll say. But the privilege is the point to an extent. She doesn't care that you're less privileged than she is. If you are, she feels like you're less worthy. And so she knows her audience. At least I'm projecting. This is how I feel about her, having been immersed in the world of Gwyneth for the last few weeks. So let's start at the beginning of this epic star story. Born to the Tony Award winner Blythe Danner and St. Elsewhere producer Bruce Paltrow in 1972, Gwyneth grew up visiting her mom on LA movie sets and playing cameos in her mom's productions at the prestigious SummerWorks Theater Festival. Gwyneth spent her earliest years just sort of being immersed in this world most of us can't imagine, right? I mean, this is the perfect story for becoming a Hollywood movie star. You've got your dad who's got connections in Hollywood, your mom who also has connections in Hollywood, but is theater royalty, right? You get your, as Malcolm Gladwell would call it, 10,000 hours in young, like you do summer works with your mom. You're always around the theater. So there's already an enormous amount of privilege, even before we factor in how wealthy her family was, right? Just having these connections is so, so valuable. Anyway, so Gwyneth got to appear in summer works plays as a kid. She definitely was surrounded by some of the best actors of her mom's generation. But it was really her father to whom Gwyneth was closest. That was, I think, having researched her most important and foundational relationship that really informed her personality and who she is. She has said of Bruce Paltrow, "My father, he was like The Rock, the guy you went to with every problem." In her biography of Gwyneth, which I highly recommend, Amy Odell suggests Blythe Danner was the stricter parent who really wanted her kids, to develop a work ethic and be conscientious people, while Bruce was a bit more indulgent. For example, one really telling difference is that he loved flying his kids first class and would brag about the fact that Gwyneth didn't really know what coach was, whereas Blythe would book coach for the kids, right? She wanted everyone to know what it was like to be a real person in the real world, right? And so I think that that's a telling difference. It's a good contrast. Bruce also famously took Gwyneth on a luxury trip to Paris as a child, telling her that she wanted to discover the city with the only man who would always love her, which I think is a little creepy.
It's so creepy. It's so creepy. I've always thought that. I remember the story very well, and she also tells it with pride. It's a little weird. Don't you want your child to fall in love one day, sir? I mean, I get it. I see how it's sentimental, but
You know what? This is the rich person version of a purity ball, in my opinion. It has the same gross overtones. I didn't know Bruce Paltrow. Can't really say for sure, but it gives me the ick. So originally raised in California, GP's family relocated to NYC after she got a little bit older. When she was a tween, they decided to go back to New York, and Gwyneth was enrolled in the prestigious Spence School. So Spence, if you don't know, is a really famous all-girls New York prep school. So I grew up reading about Spence girls in Teen Vogue. Sometimes they'd profile real teens, and I remember seeing a Spence girl profiled. She was wearing her uniform, which I remember being much chicer than mine. I think they were allowed to customize it a little bit more than we were, or even if they weren't supposed to, it seemed to be tolerated. So I don't know if anyone else is aware of Spence, but that loomed large in my idea of what it would be like to be a rich American girl. You would go to a school like Spence. And as a Toronto girl who went to a girls' school, this was fascinating to me. So if you're not familiar with NYC prep schools, I'm going to explain the hierarchy. So as I grew up, I met people who'd gone to the NYC prep schools, and I learned more about different NYC prep schools when I was in grad school. Okay, so Amy Odell also talks about this in the Gwyneth biography. The saying is that girls go to Brearley, one of the rival schools, to become doctors and lawyers. They go to Spence to marry doctors and lawyers.
wow.
So, yeah. And so I don't really relate to Gwyneth's education because I definitely went to a school where the goal was first to become doctors and lawyers, not marry them.
So as a Toronto girl who went to public school in Scarborough, this is just so wild to me. I remember me and my friends, we used to also look at those pages in the magazines, or even people we knew who went to the local art school, and we would be like, oh my God, we just want to wear uniforms. We'd love to put on the same skirt every day, which is ridiculous in retrospect. We would have hated it. But wow, what a different world. I can't even imagine all of this. It's so bizarre to me.
It is bizarre. It is a little bit weird having distance. I mean, I had a very positive high school experience, and I felt like I was taught good values. It was very feminist, and we were taught to be in touch with our privilege. The principal of my school at the time, the previous school she'd come from, was a school where a lot of the kids grew up, they were children of refugees. They were less privileged. So we were definitely made aware that we were privileged. I don't know if Spence did that. Or at least Gwyneth didn't get the message if they did. There are stories about them trying to punish her, trying to force her to go to class, and it's just not sticking.
Of course.
It's just not working.
Course.
So I'm sure there were teachers who did their best to make her less entitled. It just didn't seem to work. And to be fair, even the best school and even the best teachers, it's not going to work for every kid, right? Like you're not perfect. Just like there's no doctor who can save every patient. There's no teacher who can reach every kid. She was notorious for skipping class. She was notorious for just staying out late, partying. She did do the a cappella group, the famous a cappella group that actually Kerry Washington was into when Kerry Washington was at Spence. And Kerry Washington says that she thought Gwyneth was super cool. But Gwyneth had a reputation for being a bully. In her high school yearbook, she listed her greatest fear as obesity. There was an incident where she kind of made fun of another girl's body in a swimsuit that Amy Odell talks about in the biography. She also made fun of a girl for getting into Barnard and basically said that it was second rate. And Barnard, if you don't know, that's where Greta Gerwig went. That's where Laura Graham went. It is a college of Columbia, so it's affiliated with Columbia, but it's only for girls and women. Having said that, like, yes, it is slightly easier to get in. But what's bizarre is that when it came time for Gwyneth to apply to university, like literally they had to doctor her record for her to pass high school. And she only got into the University of Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara, because her family friend Michael Douglas was an alum and kind of like pulled strings to get her in.
Wait, this is confirmed information? We know this to be true?
Yeah.
How did they find that out?
I mean, Amy Odell researched really well. And also,
Wow.
I don't think Gwyneth has a lot of shame. But anyway, they honestly tried to do their best by her, I think. Like they tried to get her to actually embrace learning in high school, and it just didn't work. Like Gwyneth has said that her parents had high standards. She said, I had to prove on some level that I was worth something. I don't know why she says that, because it doesn't feel to me like she ever acted like she had something to prove.
Yeah.
You know, there are also stories about how like she lied about having the lead in Shakespeare plays in high school. And the teacher's like, well, we would have considered her for the lead, but we didn't think she'd do the work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she did not work hard in school. And lots of people don't work hard in high school, but sort themselves out later and develop a work ethic. I don't know. I feel like Gwyneth's attitude to high school is kind of indicative to her attitude later, right? Like not like having people doctor your record so you can pass high school, but then making fun of somebody who worked hard and got into Barnard because they didn't get into Harvard or Yale.
Because essentially she's riding by on her family's reputation and money, right? Like she never really had to try. That's the irony of it all.
Privilege in general is annoying. Lambaste the idea of the private school girl more than like the psychopathic male billionaire, right? And that's the person who's truly ruining the world. I feel like even Elon Musk and the Bezoses of the world get less hate. And I'm like, those are the people who are actively making decisions to like ruin the world. So I think sometimes when we hate on people like Gwyneth, because Gwyneth doesn't have a lot of power, as entitled as she is, it is kind of a distraction from the real problem.
But I do think to a degree, it's a bit deserved. I mean, especially when it comes to Goop, right? But I know we'll get to that in a bit, so I don't want to rush, and we'll dive into that. But I think there's a bit of it that is earned, and I think especially when you have such a big pedestal as she does in Hollywood, she's also not somebody who uses the power she does have to speak up for things where she could actually make a difference. She's very much outside of the fray, and she's always been that way. And I resent that a little bit because, of course, she's someone who's never affected by any of it, right? Like, I do think she's part of the machine in more of a way than we realize, but I understand what you're saying. I do think she's probably gotten more flack than most celebrities in some ways, but because she's got such an intense cunt energy.
Well, and I guess like celebrities that get like labeled as private school girls, it's interesting to me because she gets labeled as that. Reese doesn't. Reese also had a similar education. Kim Kardashian had a similar education, doesn't get labeled that way. So I think it is tied up in class and race, right? Where it's like being the white girl from New York, right? Is why you kind of get this label, because that's seen as like the most privileged, and it probably is.
Gwyneth doesn't come off as someone with much substance, whereas Reese comes off with quite a lot of substance. So much depth, and Reese is someone who has used her platform and her power for good, and she's built companies that do actually have so much to them, like her book club, right? And her production company, and they actually do so much good for other women in Hollywood, writers, diverse writers, whereas again I turn to Goop and I'm like, you're ruining us. You're taking us in the opposite direction.
You're right. Reese it's clear she's trying, even when she makes mistakes. It's clear she's putting effort in to try to do something constructive. And same thing with Kim Kardashian, actually.
Kim just took the bar again. P.S. We will have an update when we know the results.
Exactly. Fair enough. I guess it is fair to critique a privileged woman. I mean, for sure, absolutely, who does nothing with their privilege. You're right.
She's just the most classic white woman in that way, right?
Yes.
Like, she's a bit of a Karen in so many ways. She's someone who
she's
right, and she doesn't give a shit. She never has, and that's fine because she certainly doesn't have to. But if we're gonna compare her with someone at the likes of Reese Witherspoon, she doesn't stand a chance, does she?
Yeah, and I was talking to a friend about this yesterday who actually spent a lot of time working in the film industry and has worked with some really high profile actors as a producer. And she was like, Sarah, you can't compare her to Reese Witherspoon because Reese is a genius, and that's an unfair comparison. And she said the same thing about Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian is a genius. You can't compare Gwyneth. It's like, fine, but I really want to because I want to prove that they're winning, but still. But GP did not graduate from UCSB, even after her parents went through so much trouble to get her in, right? So much trouble. I can just imagine Blythe being like, my daughter, I've given her every opportunity. I've even lied and cheated to get her into university, and it's still not sticking, right? This is a really frustrating thing, I think, for a parent who's trying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel bad for Blythe. I mean, I really feel like, having learned a bit more about Blythe, I think Blythe is a pretty down-to-earth person. She did finish university. She has worked hard. She views acting as a craft, never wanted to be a celebrity, kind of chose not to be. Just tried to raise a nice down-to-earth kid, and it just didn't stick. It just didn't stick. So when she was at university, Gwyneth had a very casual relationship with going to class, which makes sense. That was what she did in high school. She preferred instead to audition around LA. She later spoke about how weird it was to take a film class and study the work of her own godfather, Steven Spielberg. So she dropped out.
Oh God, grown. So she dropped out.
She basically was like, well, I already know all these things because I can just ask Uncle Morty, as she called him, about his movies myself, was kind of the attitude. That's the vibe.
I couldn't roll my eyes back further. My God.
I know. She makes it so easy, right? That's the thing.
Yeah.
As nepotism would have it, Steven Spielberg also directed as a young Wendy in 1991's Hook, which was really, I would say, her break that gave her a lot of exposure. Went on to keep auditioning. And listen, yes, she did audition. She even waited tables after she dropped out. Her parents were mad at her for dropping out. So they said, you have to get a job and support yourself, which I think is the correct reaction. I actually think, other than getting her record doctored to cheat her way into university, overall, I think they were trying their best at most points. And I do think saying to your kid who's dropped out of university, we will support you if you're in university, but if you're not, you have to wait tables. I think that's good. I think that's a good reaction. So Gwyneth
Sarah, I have to say, I don't totally buy it. I feel like they probably were like, yeah, go wait tables, but we got you if you need a little cash here and there. How long did this woman wait tables? I can't imagine she did it for very long. If she was ditching classes all her life, there's no way she was making all her shifts.
You're absolutely right that it could be that
I'm just
Bruce,
saying.
handed her $100 bills every time she came to visit, something like that, right?
That's what I feel.
I believe Blythe would have stuck to her guns. I believe she would have stuck to her guns because Blythe has quite the work ethic, right? And Blythe also isn't a fancy person, so I think she'd be like, go wait tables. It'll be good for you, right? I'm fine with my kid waiting tables. I think she'd be okay with it. I feel like if anyone cheated here, it would probably have been Bruce. I buy that. Blythe was a strict parent. I buy that about her. Having researched her, I actually fell a little bit in love with Blythe Danner. I'm like, what a nice lady and what a talented theater actor.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Became quite successful in her 20s. And it's because even though I don't think, her parents were supporting her to a huge degree, people wanted to take auditions from the daughter of Blythe Danner and Bruce Paltrow. And she had an advantage of looking a lot like her mom. So she looked a lot like somebody that they wanted to cast. And Blythe had kind of turned her nose up at stardom. I don't mean that in a bad way. She just sort of felt like it wasn't where the best work was. She preferred theater. So I think in some ways, you're finally getting the chance to cast this woman you wanted to cast in your prime, but by casting her daughter, her lookalike daughter.
Well, that's interesting.
So I think she has that advantage, right? And so she was kind of the queen of the Nepo babies, right? People auditioned her, and I'm not saying she's talentless, right? I actually don't think she's as talented as most people do.
I think she's quite good. I think she's very good. I mean, she used to be. She doesn't clock in anymore in the way she used to, and the roles she picks now are definitely like just for fun and for the check, maybe. But if you go a little further back, I thought she was fantastic, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, anyway, she did well in auditions. She started getting cast in a lot of things. And Gwyneth has kind of said about this time in her life that she feels like the way she worked her way up is proof that she's not super privileged. This is an actual Gwyneth quote. I don't have a trust fund, so it's not accurate. That's in relation to people calling her privileged.
Oh, God.
So it's interesting that her definition of privilege is having a trust fund. I don't think that's most people's definition of privilege. I mean, that's one form of privilege, but she did have very connected parents. And you're right. I'm sure Bruce would have helped her out if she'd really been on the verge of starvation. Like, I don't think she was gonna ever really be in a hard spot. And Allison Williams has actually talked really articulately about that, about how her biggest advantage wasn't even her dad's connections. It was knowing that if acting didn't work out for her, she was not going to starve to death, right? Like, she would have a safety net. Like, and she's talked about that. Like, yeah, her dad had connections, but also it's a privilege just to know that you have a home you can go back to, right? And that you have parents who will care for you because they have the means to do so. So I would just like Gwyneth Paltrow to sit down with Allison Williams and just learn from Allison Williams about how to be self-aware. Anyway.
She's one of very few Nepo babies who has actually spoken well about being a Nepo baby and owned it. Many other Nepo babies, including Gwyneth, just cannot admit the truth, which is that, yes, this was a huge, massive, massive advantage. This girl would not be where she is if she did not have the parents that she did. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. Like, that little scene in Hook that helped her get where she is, her godfather being Spielberg, Uncle Morty, like, come on, girl, you have to admit the truth. If you admit the truth, you're much more likable. It's much more endearing.
Mm-hmm.
When you deny it, it comes off so much worse.
I think about somebody like Rosebud Baker, who's a comedian I love. And she's a Democrat. She's progressive. But her grandfather was, I believe, the chief of staff for the first George Bush and was very high up in Republican politics. And she makes jokes about that all the time. She's like, I'm progressive, but I also know that Saudi oil money paid for my college, right? Like, that makes her more endearing, right? Because yes, it's not her fault she was born into that family, but she laughs at herself and laughs at it. And so I do wish that Gwyneth would hang out with other Nepo babies who found a way to be more self-aware and to laugh at themselves, right? And to admit their privilege. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Gwyneth, obviously, her career took off in the 90s. I mean, she became something of a fashion it girl. She became one of Calvin Klein's favorite actresses to dress. He really liked her minimalist style. And she actually said that her minimalist style, the origins of that was the Spence uniform, which Google it. It's a very chic uniform and it is very minimalist. And she's like, that taught me how to dress. And I'm like, you know what? I buy that. So obviously the woman looked great in the clothes of the 90s, right? Because basically you needed to be tall and thin to look great in a lot of those outfits. And she was. And she also started to do some pretty critically acclaimed work after building her profile. I mean, she got to be in Seven. She got to be in Jefferson in Paris. And actually, according to everyone who worked with her on Jefferson in Paris, she did work quite hard for that role. I mean, she had to learn to play a song on the piano. She had to do lots of things. So At the beginning of her career, she is showing a significant work ethic, I do have to say. She can work hard. She does know how to do it. I think it makes sense. She would have grown up seeing her parents work hard. So she knew how to when she had to, when she was kind of building her profile. She also finally got her big break when she got to play the lead in Emma, which was a movie that was critically acclaimed, even though it's one of my least favorite Jane Austen adaptations. And this is like a religion for me. I love Jane Austen adaptations. And she also, on the press tour, bizarrely went on and on about how she thought Jane Eyre was a better book than Emma. Why would you say that? And why would you insult the Austen fans, right? Don't insult the Austen fans by bringing up a Bronte.
She probably thought it was an Austen book, I have to assume.
No. She would say Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is a better book.
Oh, yikes. Okay, sorry, Gwyneth. I was trying to help you out there. Damn.
Even if you think that, why say that during the promotional tour when all the Austen fans are excited and that's one of their favorite books? Because Emma is beloved, and one of the reasons is, in literature, this book, you cannot overstate how innovative it was at the time. It was one of the first unlikable female protagonists, right? Honestly, it was. If you read old English literature books written by dudes, the women are just perfect and they don't have feelings and they don't say anything. Emma's kind of a jerk and she makes mistakes. And the whole arc is this really privileged girl learning how not to be a jerk, like learning how to be a good member of her community, right? That is what she is learning. And at the end, there's a reward. She becomes a better friend. Her friendships are better. She like finally gets together with this guy that she's been in love with for a while. So like there are lots of rewards for it, for this character arc. And I was like, is this just hurting Gwyneth because she's like, I don't want to learn how to not be a jerk, so I don't like the message of this movie.
Comes off very out of touch. Like, I'm not surprised. She's never really been that good at the publicity of it all. Even now when she does press, like it ends up being a meme because she'll just be very blunt if she doesn't like something. I kind of appreciate that in some ways. But yeah, she's never really clicked into it all, I don't think.
No, I would say that is the case. But she also had this really long-standing collaboration with Miramax. So she worked alongside Harvey Weinstein. My favorite Gwyneth Paltrow role that happened in the 90s was when she played Helen in my personal favorite romantic comedy of all time, Sliding Doors. That's actually one of my favorite movies. Love that movie. What is your favorite Gwyneth movie from the 90s?
I really loved Seven a lot. I really loved Talented Mr. Ripley, obviously.
Yeah.
I even liked A Perfect Murder, which I know I even had Great Expectations. Honestly, I enjoyed a lot of them. Mrs. Parker and the Vicious Circle, I really loved that movie. Like even in the beginning when she was in these smaller roles, she would be in great movies. She didn't have the biggest part in Heart 8. I loved Heart 8. I liked all of them, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, she made Ripley is a great movie. That is a perfect film. I actually think it's incredibly underrated. And a lot of critics really love Ripley. That's a great movie. And I think it's the movie that uses her best. She's essentially playing who she would have been in that era, a rich girl living in Italy trying to write a novel, but not really writing a novel. That is who she would have been. But she's great. She's great in that, you know, sometimes you just got to play the part where you understand the part.
A lot of the roles she had in the 90s, including Ripley, including Seven, she's still playing, as great as these movies are, she's still just playing the girlfriend. There's not so much meat to it. Whereas Sliding Doors, there's a ton of meat to it. So I really think like when she would get that opportunity, she really chewed it up. She was good.
And this has led to my own personal belief that I'm trying to make a saying that it is good luck to just barely miss the subway. If you don't understand what that means, watch Sliding Doors. Every time I just barely miss the subway, I'm like, great, I'm going to live. I'm not going to die tragically. Right? Amazing. I get so relieved.
Do you know what's so funny? You and I are the same. And it also because of this movie. My feelings are not necessarily, though, that I could die if I got on. My feeling is like, oh my God, if I had gotten on, what a horrific domino effect I might have experienced. Maybe I would have lost my job. Maybe I would have broken up with my boyfriend, like whatever, right? But I have the same thing. I think a lot of people did after they watched that movie. It had such an impact in the 90s. It really did.
Great movie. Everyone should watch this movie. A lot of good films in the 90s. That's definitely when she did her best work.
She was really suited to that era, and I miss that era so badly because I feel like we don't get movies like that anymore, right? Great Expectations or like Perfect Murder or like Hush. Do you remember Hush? Like all of those movies, that would never happen now. And I think maybe that's part of the reason she doesn't connect the way that she used to. It's just not her era anymore, sadly.
It's not because she specialized in movies for grown-ups that weren't action movies, but big budget motion pictures, not really indie movies. I mean, she did some indie movies, but she was best in a glossy, big budget movie that wasn't wasn't for action movie purposes, right? Like A Perfect Murder or Shakespeare in Love. Those are her best roles. The girl needs a budget, right? But also she doesn't want to make a Marvel movie. Well, she did make Marvel movies, but she didn't even watch them.
Well, see, Sarah, I'm going to disagree with you because I think I liked her more. Again, I've mentioned 100 times now, but Proof or even Sliding Doors, like those aren't big budget movies, right? Or even the Sylvia Plath movie. I think she did better when she didn't take the massive check and when she decided to go for the substance again. Yeah. Evidently, maybe she didn't like doing that, or maybe she preferred the big check, which we know she loves. So I find that quite disappointing. Like this is a hill I will die on. I've talked about this many times in my life, that I think she's a very good actress, but she really has to find the right role. And unfortunately, I think she doesn't care much too a lot of the time.
Gwyneth didn't just become known for her acting in the 90s. One thing that I think made her a superstar was really who she dated, right? It was that combination of being beautiful, being critically acclaimed, but also dating the other biggest celebrities of her era. And I don't actually think she did that for attention. There are some celebrities who I'm like, you don't actually like that person, you're dating them for attention. I think she genuinely dated all these people because I think Gwyneth gravitates towards men who are top of their field, right? Like this is the girl in high school who dated the captain of the football team, right? I was the girl in high school who dated the captain of the Reach for the Top team. So I don't relate to this, but she is the girl who has to be with, I would say, the most aspirational man at all times. And she's beautiful and apparently very charming, and she can make that happen for herself. So she had a very high profile relationship with Brad Pitt. There was a huge fascination with them. You know, he was the most eligible man, arguably, of the mid-90s, right? They became engaged in 1996. By all accounts, the two were very attracted to each other and were very much in love. They kind of looked related. That's my one critique. They kind of looked like they could be siblings, which I find weird, right? I do find a little bit weird. They had this vibe, especially because Brad started wearing his hair like she was wearing her hair.
Yeah.
And they kind of looked like twins, which is a little strange.
He used to do that. Yeah. We'll put some photos in the show notes so you can check out the disturbing likeness.
Yeah. So people would often refer to them as happy Romeo and Juliet because they seemed so passionate and so in love, but they weren't dying. Even referred to Gwyneth as the love of his life in a Golden Globes acceptance speech as Gwyneth gazed adoringly at her then fiance. And I do remember that moment because she did seem to be so truly in love with him and he seemed to be so truly in love with her. So I do believe that this was real. However, there were problems that we'll get to later. Pitt also famously defended GP when Harvey Weinstein sexually harassed her. And this makes me like him less because while I do respect that he defended his partner, he knew Harvey was doing this to other women and didn't care. Like he only cared when it's like his woman, right? And that actually really bothers me when you're as powerful as Brad Pitt and you're not speaking out about Harvey Weinstein earlier. And he's not the only male actor who did that. A lot of them knew what was happening or probably knew what was happening and did not speak out and really could have. But after being cast as the lead in Emma, arguably her highest profile role earlier in her career before Shakespeare in Love, Weinstein cornered Gwyneth in a hotel room and suggested she massage him. Obviously, we know that this is his move, and we know that that is intended as sexual, like he is harassing her. There's no ambiguity. This is his pattern. And when Pitt found out, he was really alarmed. He got mad. And in 2017, at the height of the Me Too movement and during Harvey's downfall, a source told People magazine of that particular incident, Brad threatened Harvey. He got right in his face, poked him in the chest and said, "You will never do this to Gwyneth ever again." When you realize that Brad Pitt knew this woman, however, was being harassed and just basically defended her honor, didn't say like, don't do this to anyone. That is what I don't really like. I don't really think that that's allyship. I think that that's just sort of traditional patriarchy, where it's like, I'll protect my woman, the women in my life, and not others. And now we know that Brad Pitt's like not a great guy. I mean, he did hit his wife, Angelina Jolie, on a plane, right? So this does kind of fit in with what we know about him, I would say. What about you? What do you think?
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think this being his girlfriend, like that means it impacts him in some way, right? So it's a bit of I don't want to say selfish because I still think there's something gallant to this that he did protect her. That's really wonderful in itself. I'm glad he did. That's huge that she had such high wattage protection, right? Like if he was anyone else, if he was a smaller name, it wouldn't have that impact. It's because he's Brad Pitt. But I agree with you. If we zoom out a little bit, yeah, of course, it would have been so great if he also spoke up for the other women. I think it's fair to assume he probably knew that Weinstein was doing this with other women. We don't totally know that, but I think it's pretty likely. But you know what? As he's one of the few men we know who did say something to him, so I'm going to give him a little bit of kudos for that, and that is very hard for me to do because I fucking hate Brad Pitt.
So this paved the way for Gwyneth to keep working with Harvey, and she did. That's when she won her Oscar, and we'll get to that later. But Gwyneth and Brad broke up before walking down the aisle. They were engaged, but they didn't get married. Amy Odell, in her book, suggests that they just weren't well suited. So Brad was an atheist when he met Gwyneth, but he had a religious Christian upbringing, and his upbringing wasn't as privileged as hers. And she would kind of make fun of him for that. Like, she would make fun of him for not knowing how to order the right caviar, and would mock his modest religious upbringing with her friends. It's mean. It's mean. It's bullying. That's mean. So it just sounds like these are two people who are really physically attracted, but just didn't have a lot in common. So they broke up, and GP didn't stop dating celebrities. She took up with your favorite staff, Ben Affleck, whom she felt spent too much time playing video games and not enough time with her. But she did, a little while back, tell Alex Cooper of Call Her Daddy that Ben was a, quote, technically excellent lover. So I think the connection was mostly sexual. They were even caught kind of getting it on the set of Shakespeare in Love by somebody on the crew who was going to get them, who caught them in kind of being intimate. So I think that there was a lot of lust there. I think that was what the relationship was based on, which, like, two good-looking people, that makes sense. They couldn't keep their hands off each other. And that one didn't work out either. But despite this, the pair teamed up for a hilarious SNL moment. So do you remember that moment where Gwyneth was doing the opening monologue on SNL in an English accent, and then Ben stood up in the audience and was like, "You're American. I know because I dated you."
Love that.
That was hilarious. So I actually feel like that was her laughing at herself, and I think that's the most she's ever laughed at herself. I liked that version of her. He brought out the best in her, but he just wasn't ready to settle down. It seemed like he was kind of not mature enough yet. So I feel like if they'd met a little bit later when he was more mature, she could have been his Jennifer Garner. She would never have been his Jennifer Lopez, but I feel like she could have been his Jennifer Garner. However, that's not the life Gwyneth would want for herself. She's not going to drive her ex-husband to rehab. And I respect that. I don't think you have to.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Okay. So that didn't work out. And eventually she went on to marry Coldplay frontman Chris Martin, because she's always going to date the most popular guy in metaphorical Hollywood high, right? That's what's going to happen. It's funny. They were rumored to be dating before they even met, because I think the world just was like, these people will be perfect together. The biggest rock star, one of the biggest movie stars, put them together, right? And we all manifested that relationship, and then they had 2 children together. What is your favorite GP romance, Steph?
Well, I mean, come on. I love my Affleck. So of course I loved that. And they did that goofy movie. Didn't they also do Bounce together? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes. That is a bad movie. But yes, they did it.
Yes. Did I love it? Absolutely. I wish they'd done more together. I wish they would do it now. They were just fun, and kind of that Hollywood OOs way, You would love finding them on the cover of a magazine or a tabloid. I loved that era. But I also really I don't know if I loved her with Chris Martin, but I liked that period in time because he made a lot of good music during that time. Like, Fix You is one of my favorite Coldplay songs, and that's about Gwyneth and when she lost her dad, and I love that song so deeply. Lest we forget, their daughter Apple also kick-started so much talk online about celebrities and child naming conventions, and God, that was an era, like, she fed us a lot with the men she was with in terms of tabloid news. I miss that.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
So back to Gwyneth's career. In 1999, she famously won her Oscar for Shakespeare in Love. And this might be the biggest scandal she was ever a part of, which is bizarre. She wore a pink Ralph Lauren ball gown that became iconic, even though it didn't really fit. Apparently, she didn't wear it properly. She was kind of missing pieces of it. And I think they were quite upset about that. But it still became iconic anyway, even though it did not fit well. She also wore a gorgeous diamond necklace that was on loan originally, but her parents bought for her as a present for winning the Oscar. I'm not even kidding you.
Of course.
Such a privileged girl moment. She walked around the Oscars party afterwards, the after party, saying, "My daddy's going to buy it for me."
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's gross. This is why people hated her. Harvey Weinstein publicly referred to Gwyneth as the muse for his studio Miramax. So she was at the top of the world. She was in her 20s, had already won an Oscar. Her dad was buying her the jewelry she was wearing to the event. I mean, come on. Who was having a better night in the history of the world than Gwyneth Paltrow that night? But while winning an Oscar in your 20s should be great, right? I mean, winning an Oscar is typically the pinnacle of any actor's career. It's actually one of the more controversial Oscar wins in history, so that must be remembered. Many people, including me, wanted Cate Blanchett to win that year for Elizabeth. I was a stan for Cate Blanchett. I was devastated when Gwyneth won. I remember staying up late to watch the Oscars and being so upset. And more than 2 decades later, Glenn Close gave an interview in 2020 where she asserted that she felt Gwyneth Paltrow did not deserve that Oscar, even though it was given to her more than 2 decades prior. She thought that fellow nominee Fernanda Montenegro should have won. And a lot of people also think that. Shakespeare in Love won a lot of awards people didn't necessarily think it deserved. I mean, it won Best Picture when a lot of people felt Saving Private Ryan should have won Best Picture, right? I mean, it's arguable that if you hadn't had Harvey's aggressive campaign, that maybe Gwyneth wouldn't have won. And definitely it hasn't aged super well. After winning her Oscar in her 20s, Gwyneth also kind of had a tough time because she had this identity crisis. And she said, quote, this is from People magazine, "Once I won the Oscar, it put me into a little bit of an identity crisis because if you win the biggest prize, like, what are you supposed to do?" And this is something it reminds me of something my mom says. My mom always tells me, you don't want to peak too young. And I think Gwyneth Paltrow might be a great example of that because she gets this role, she gets this recognition, she wins an Oscar at such a young age. And where do you go from there, right? You have the pinnacle of your career in your 20s, and then if everything's going to be a disappointment afterwards unless you become a serial Oscar winner, which she didn't do.
I agree in theory, but I think this is, again, that whole thing where you've got to somehow try to separate the awards from the actual work. Because, as you say, Shakespeare in Love was not a good movie. Did I enjoy it? Did I have fun? Well, I watched 100 more times before I hit the grave. Absolutely. But she could do so much better. She could have absolutely had so much more to work on. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration. However, this was an era where Oscars were everything. And my God, I loved them. Like, we had a different conversation around awards at the time. So I do get it. I do understand. She was very young to win. And it was definitely a very premature win. But no, she had so much more to come. Glee was waiting for her. Little did she know.
I really don't think she would have won today, though, because of all the Nepo baby discourse. I don't think somebody that privileged with that performance. I think she could have gotten nominated. I don't think she would have won today. What about you?
She's the star of an era. She's the star of a certain era. I don't think she makes much sense now. You know, I think even like a George Clooney type doesn't necessarily make much sense now. But
no.
Now is also not my favorite era of Hollywood. Okay, burn it down. I like the yesteryear. Give me the Gwyneths and the Georges. I don't care.
Yeah, fair. She was a Nepo baby, but she brought the glamour, right? Like she was always fun to watch.
And she was good. She was good. I stand by it.
Yeah, no, she's talented. I will never say that she's completely talentless. I just, at this time, I really didn't want her to have the Oscar. I wanted Cate Blanchett to have it.
I'm with you. I think it should have been Kate. There's no doubt about it. Meryl Streep was in that category. Emily Watson was in that category.
I know.
Come on
Emily
now.
Watson's
It was
great.
ludicrous. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think she would have won that Oscar today. So I understand why it was controversial at the time. I do think it's weird that people like Glenn Close are still mad about it. I think that's strange. Like, move on.
Well, a part of me isn't even sure she wouldn't win it today. I think she would, because I think it's become more of a popular vote as time has gone on. Don't you think? Like, it happens more often now than it did before, that the Oscar goes to someone who's not at all deserving, or it goes to someone for the wrong role because that role just happens to be really buzzy right now.
And
so
also,
I think it could totally
goes to
happen
the
now.
ingenue a lot. It goes to the
Exactly.
ingenue in their 20s. Like, they're in the OOs in particular. And I guess for the last 20 years, it's become something of like a young person's achievement award. So many young people who will probably do better work later on have received it. And it's, in my opinion, because the Academy is pervy and is like, we like hot women to win awards who are super young.
Yeah. I mean, like, and also women who will play a prostitute. Sorry, Mikey Madison. I love you and Honora, but I don't think that win made sense. I also think Jennifer Lawrence is not even half as good as people like to say she is. And how many Oscars does she have now? Like, I think actually, if we're talking about awards, maybe Gwyneth was ahead of her time in that sense. Like, that was a sign of what was to come. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the years following her Oscar win, Gwyneth failed to live up to the promise of the first award. I mean, she did have some solid performances. I will defend The Talented Mr. Ripley to my death. I think it's one of the greatest movies of the last 50 years. Also, Proof, you mentioned, and it's a solid performance. It's a small movie, but it's a good movie. But she made a lot of absolute dreck, like the worst movies ever. View from the Top, one of the worst movies of all time. Shallow Hal, awful and offensive. In the latter film, Shallow Hal, Gwyneth wore a fat suit. She told Entertainment Tonight of that experience, "I got a real sense of what it would be like to be that overweight, and every pretty girl should be forced to do that." Thus suggesting that anybody who's larger than she is can't be pretty. It's just, I don't know, she just says so many things that are tone deaf. Is this a reflection of the lack of good roles for women at the time? Do you think she was bad at choosing roles? Or was Gwyneth just not as talented as people initially believed?
We talk a lot about the Oscar curse, right? I think it tends to affect women mostly, doesn't it? Like, after they win the Oscar, they get sacked with a lot of terrible gigs. And it seems like she really had that happen. It's so unfortunate because View from the Top and Shallow Hal are very weird Oscar follow-ups, aren't they? Like, I always used to think that's so odd. Did she sign the contract before she won? Like, I mean, and mind you, Shallow Hal was at a different time when people didn't bat much of an eye. I hate to say it, as deeply offensive as that movie was, but I can't really understand it. I think maybe she also didn't have the best team on her side because, again, Shakespeare in Love was also not really a great movie. So I think she didn't have the best system when it came to picking roles. And I do think she liked big budget roles. I think she liked to do big movies, even though she was better suited to smaller ones.
Yeah, I mean, I also think to an extent, and this is the problem with being the ingenue, it's hard to grow up. I think to a certain extent, she was replaced by Keira Knightley. So Gwyneth liked to do a lot of period pieces. And then Keira came in and was actually British and looked even more like she was a person from the past. And Keira has talked about struggling with that, about how she doesn't just want to do period pieces, but that's the roles people want to give her. So much of that is about ageism in Hollywood, right? Where you play the ingenue until you play the mom or the Christine Baranski character, the great aunt. And if you don't want to play those roles, then you just don't work ever again.
Yeah, you're right.
I think that must be hard. Like, once you get into your 30s in Hollywood, you are really like, if you are not producing your own stuff, like a Reese Witherspoon, it is very hard for you to find work, right? So after a decade of making mostly disappointing films, GP consciously slowed down upon giving birth to her first child, baby Apple, who was soon thereafter followed by Moses. She was an eccentric baby namer. Living in her then husband's native United Kingdom, traveling to sets around the world didn't really seem appealing. She thought that was very difficult. She actually told E, "I think it's different when you have an office job because it's routine and you can do all the stuff in the morning and then you come home in the evening. When you're shooting a movie, they're like, we need you to go to Wisconsin for 2 weeks." So saying her job with all the money she makes and all the help she has is harder than, say, a woman who's an HR manager's job. That really upset a lot of people because it was just so out of touch with her privilege. I mean, Gwyneth is a person who can afford all the childcare, who can afford a live-in chef, right? And a lot of middle-class moms can't even really afford takeout if they're having a busy day. So that's just another example of Gwyneth like not understanding privilege. But she did scale back her career. And then she became the prototypical influencer. In 2008, GP founded Goop, a lifestyle website that defies categorization. It was part cooking blog featuring recipes for organic muffins, part travel guide recommending high-priced hotels that would make the White Lotus look like a trash motel, and part shopping guide that seemed unaware most people couldn't afford to buy their accessories at Chopard. The publication made internet traffic from trafficking in incendiary posts. There was also editorial content. Gwyneth clapped back at people who said she was privileged and said we needed to end the mommy wars. There's a lot of different things happening, and there are a lot of different iterations of Goop. The name Goop was chosen because it could mean, quote, everything and anything, right? Everything and nothing, right? That was what they kind of thought. It also contained Gwyneth's initials, GP, but the ambiguous everything and nothing or everything and anything that this name really referred to seemed to foreshadow Goop's history of identity crises. Over the years, Goop had had countless evolutions, de-emphasizing travel later, firing most of its editorial staff, right? They got into writing, they kind of got out of writing, branching out into products and licensing. In the early years, there were a lot of brand partnerships where Gwyneth would wear the clothes and was something like, so it is kind of like what an Instagram influencer would do today. She just did it first and on a website. The tone of Goop as a website, in my opinion, can best be described as smug. Even Gwyneth's divorce was described on Goop as conscious uncoupling, not breaking up like lonely normal people do. As Gwyneth insisted, quote, my life is good because I am not passive about it. For their part, critics like The Guardian saw Paltrow's foray into lifestyle as bothersome. An article in The Guardian declared of Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow has found a way, to her credit, to become even more annoying. Sadaf, are you now or have you ever been a fan of Goop?
No, nor shan't I one day. I will say they did some smart marketing coming up with that terrible name because it was so talked about, like her daughter's name, Apple, that it kind of stuck in everyone's conscience, right? And you wanted to go check out what it was. I certainly did. I do here and there. Here's my problem with Goop, that it's promoted a lot of false, very, very false science, quote unquote, particularly when it comes to sex. And I think that's really awful because that news gets picked up, it swirls around, it becomes the viral thing for the week. And it's so goddamn wrong. You've got women shoving stuff up their cooches that they shouldn't be because Goop/Gwyneth is telling you it's great for you. And she spread that BS on late night, on like any random interview. Nobody's fact checking her. I think it's honestly really damaging and dangerous. I think it's terrible. And as you said, like she's schlepping very expensive stuff. Who's buying this? And now there's a Goop kitchen too, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, people buy it. It's just a lot of misinformation too. While Goop has been known to be a bit of a toxic workplace with high turnover, it is perhaps Goop's foray into the world of wellness that became the biggest controversy. Gwyneth herself has been one for alternative medicine for a really long time. And she became a fierce defender of it with, she's basically taking credit for popularizing yoga in North America, which like, okay. Gwyneth, like, okay, she's such a white woman. But in August of 2025, The Independent referred to Paltrow as, quote, the original anti-science influencer. And that title makes sense. You mentioned some of those examples. She was known to work with people who had anti-vax beliefs. That's one thing she did. She also hilariously endorsed and sold products like jade eggs, marketed as useful for vaginal health, that you're supposed to put in your vagina. Dr. Jen Gunter refuted this claim successfully. She is a gynecologist and refuted it. And of course, who could forget the candle Paltrow sold called This Candle Smells Like My Vagina? That bizarrely sold out. People
I'm not
buy
shocked.
this stuff.
You know what? Sir, I would have bought one. I would have bought one and I would have had a whole party based around it. And it would have been my little novelty gift for the year. To myself. That's what she is, right? She's a novelty. This woman is a novelty even now in our world. She wasn't that before, but now it's almost like she knows she's a joke. She knows that this is what her whole thing is. When she put that candle out, I was like, oh, she gets it. Like she's kind of keeping the joke going. She knows people are laughing at her. And I don't know, I think there's something smart to that in terms of marketing. I think that's partly why the company still does so well, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's also other stuff that she endorsed that was quite dangerous, like vaginal steaming. People can get injured. She was a fan of bee sting therapy that can be very dangerous. And when critics like Jen Gunter would go after Paltrow's tendency to peddle in quackery, Gwyneth did not take it lying down. So you can read Jen Gunter has very detailed takedowns of things like the jade egg, right? And she, as a gynecologist, has a lot of research and a lot of valid arguments to explain why this is not something you should put in your vagina. However, this irked Gwyneth. In 2017, Gwyneth fired back at Jen Gunter, referring to her as strangely confident about her beliefs that jade eggs do not help one's vagina. I feel like if you are an expert in vaginal health as a gynecologist, you can be confident. I don't understand why this woman has to pretend like she doesn't understand vaginal health. Constantly, the main character of her story, that's how I will refer to as GP, she's always the main character. She also accused Jen Gunter of basically trying to boost her brand by attacking Goop. And she said, quote, "Since her first post, she has been taking advantage of the attention and issuing attacks to build her personal platform, ridiculing the women who might read our site in the process." So that's a very Gwyneth thing to say, right? You're just mad at me for being more popular and you're just trying to get popular by arguing with me. In recent years, Goop has continued to be a weird publication. That's my opinion. I think it's weird.
Yes.
Now pared down, G often uses the site to sell products like her G label clothes, where a striped sweater will set you back $695. Like most celebrities who want to become entrepreneurs, she's also dabbling in beauty with Goop Beauty. Gwyneth herself is regularly featured using her products on her site. Gwyneth also married powerful Hollywood producer Brad Falchuk, known for shows like Glee. The two were wed in a lavish ceremony in the Hamptons in 2018. And she became next level viral in 2023 when retired optometrist Terry Sanderson sued Paltrow for running into him, that's what he says, on the ski slopes of an elite resort. So the trial, I loved the trial. It was amazing. It produced great content. At one point, Paltrow tried to bring treats for everyone in the courtroom, but the presiding judge explained that wasn't appropriate. And Paltrow won the case. And then she famously touched Sanderson and said, "I wish you well," on her way out. Just, I wish you well. Love.
She looked like a comical villain during that whole trial. I was obsessed with every look she had on. It was remarkable. Her greatest performance, one might say.
Honestly, and this was one of the few times I would say, like, Gwyneth went up against somebody with less privilege, but was in the right. And she was savoring it. You can tell this woman was enjoying a conflict where she was in the right, as we all do. Actually, I'm petty enough that if I'm in the right in a conflict, I savor that. And so that was kind of how I liked Gwyneth. I was like, you know what? I'm rooting for you. You're showing up wearing the robe. You're saying you did suffer in this accident too because you missed half a day of skiing. And while Gwyneth still acts sporadically, her last role was playing a voice in 2023's season of American Horror Story, so she's not exactly high profile when it comes to acting. With both kids off at university, the 52-year-old is also an empty nester, and despite having worked with Goop for a long time, one thing that is pointed out in the new biography is that it hasn't become anything close to a lot of other celebrity businesses that have launched, around the same time or after. For example, Kim Kardashian's Skims has a $4 billion valuation. Rihanna's Fenty Beauty has a $2.8 billion valuation. And Goop has still never gotten to the $1 billion valuation level. What do we make of the Oscar-winning actress who looked ready to light the world on fire in her 20s and now is the architect of Goop? By Nepo baby standards, is Gwyneth Paltrow high-achieving or a bit of an underperformer? And also, is it even fair of us to judge her that way?
Yes, we should definitely judge. Yes, absolutely. This is a white woman on quite a pedestal who's run on privilege forever. We're definitely going to judge. I think she's interesting. I feel like when she was younger and her whole thing was like, I'm going to skip every class just to have a fun day or night, that rhetoric has carried her through life, And why not? Like, she doesn't have to do shit. She has plenty of money to live life the way she wants to. Goop doesn't have to be a Skims or a Fenty, right? She has absolutely nothing to prove. And I think in a way that's great. Good. Yeah. Live your life. There's a reason Goop doesn't target one particular thing. She doesn't have that. There is no signature to Gwyneth, and that works well for her. I think in terms of acting, I'm personally disappointed because I would have loved to see her do more of those really good roles. I thought she was really good. Again, I'll say it. So I missed that. I don't think we're ever going to really get that back. It seems like she just comes back occasionally for Ryan Murphy. She was in that terrible show too, The Politician. I wish she would also distance herself from him, but hey, she's married to his business partner. I'm bored by her now. I'm bored, but I'm glad she's happy. She's living a good life. What can you say? What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, this is an insanely privileged person, so I do think it's fine to judge her. I think it's interesting. She built this huge platform for herself. And unlike a Reese Witherspoon, who has gotten people to read new emerging authors, women authors, diverse authors, and has made projects that really give a lot of great roles to actresses of a certain age who aren't getting a lot of great roles. Like, that's the type of thing that I would have loved to see Gwyneth do when the roles dried up, because there is some people have suggested that she did Goop because the roles were kind of drying up, right? And that was happening for Reese too, and she's talked about that, where she was kind of aging out of romantic comedies and she didn't want to just do romantic comedies anyway, and so she made her own roles, right? She produced them. And I just wonder why Gwyneth didn't do that. Like, when you have this amount of privilege, when you have so much privilege, when you have such a big platform, yeah, why not try to change the world rather than just leaning into the worst parts of yourself, the most entitled parts of yourself? And that's what I think we can really fault her for, right? Anyway, and because, Reese can be entitled too, right? I'm an American citizen standing on American ground, right?
Yeah.
But, we know Reese can be entitled, but she didn't decide to focus her career around the insufferable parts of her personality. She's worked hard to develop other parts of who she is.
I mean, I was just saying this to a friend the other day, but white women are still white women at the end of the day.
And no one is whiter than Gwyneth Paltrow.
There you go. There you go.
Yes. The definition of white woman in the dictionary. So this brings us to our final segment, Hindsight is 2025, where we choose the one moment that we might have handled differently if we were the subject of this story.
I shouldn't have done that.
Stuff. What would it be for you?
Oh my. Whew. God, there's quite a few. I mean, the big one for me, and you might agree with me on this one, is her going to battle with Jen Gunter. We love Jen Gunter over here, and I think she should have just owned the bullshit that Goop was perpetuating. But then at the same time, it's worked for her because it's made people gravitate to the site even more, right? Like, it's only been bait, which I can see she likes for the site. So it kind of works for it. And my other thing is, again, selfishly, like, I do wish that she just work a little more, but that's not something where she necessarily needs to change her narrative. That's just what Sadaf personally would like in life. But Sarah, what about you?
Probably would have parted ways with Harvey Weinstein sooner. And this is not to blame the victim, because what happened to her is terrible, right? And all women, no matter how privileged, can be victims of sexual violence. And Gwyneth Paltrow proves that, right? One of the most privileged women in the world was, one of Harvey's victims. But I think after she won the Oscar, he started putting her in really bad movies like View from the Top. And I think I probably would have just branched out a little bit more. I would have seen what else was out there, right? I might have done TV sooner and not just Glee. I might have done prestige TV, which Nicole Kidman has had a lot of luck with that. And that, I think, has kept Nicole Kidman relevant so that she does get to make movies like Baby Girl, right? And she can carry a movie like that because you still think of her as a big name. She does 9 Perfect Strangers, so you see her there. She does that terrible Netflix show at the beach house, The Perfect Couple, right? But that is strategic and it's important. Yes, that stuff is fun, but it keeps her relevant so that she can carry an art film, right? And that challenges our notions of women's sexuality.
Yeah.
So I would say Nicole Kidman has amazing representation and amazing strategy. Gwyneth probably should have just done what she was doing.
But I think the reality is Gwyneth doesn't really want to act anymore, right? She's not interested in any of this stuff. It's part of the reason she pulled out of the MCU movies. Like, she's not interested in any of this anymore. That's the difference. Like, Nicole really loves her job. She loves doing this and she wants to do it forever. I think Gwyneth probably is not a fan of the whole game and all of that. And again, now she has the wealth and the life that she probably really just wanted, like, to just chill out, and she can afford whatever she wants. She's got her kids. They're grown up. She's married again. She's living her best life, really.
Yeah, fair enough. You know what? And to an extent, it's like she's the high school bully who went on to be quite successful, but realized bullying was her passion. So she created a website to bully women. On that note. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you to our wonderful listeners. We love all of you. You can listen to more of The Reheat for free on the Seeker app, and you can also find the show on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear more from me, you can find me at Sahagian Sarah on Instagram. And Sadaf, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me on Twitter at _Stephason. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. And if you'd like us to keep growing, we'd love for you to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/The Reheat, where we've got some goods in store for you. Thanks for listening.